everybody. How are you? Good. If you don't know me, I'm Luciana Spraker. I'm the director of the city's municipal archives, and we're really happy to have you here for our June Hungry for History program. Wanted to give you a heads up of our July program. As some of you may know, we are embarking on an interior restoration project here at City Hall. So on July 31st, which is a Wednesday at 3:30, we're going to do a special little program and tour and talk about the interior restoration work that is starting. And we'll have some archival materials out related to City Hall's construction. So if you're just sort of interested in getting a heads up, a sneak preview of what we're doing and seeing the before, and then we're going to invite everybody back after so you can see the after. So information will come out regarding that. If you're not personally on our email list served to get program information, you'd like to be, there's a pad at the end of the table. Just add your name and email to the list before you leave today, and we will get you on that email list. So we are very lucky to have Jamie Credle from the Green-Meldrim House here with us today. Jamie became the executive director of this important historic site last July. There she's responsible for both the management of the 1853 Gothic Revival style home and making it open and accessible to the public. Jamie is a leader in the museum community. She received a Lifetime Achievement Award for 20 years of service as director of the Davenport House Museum last year from the Georgia Historical Records Advisory Council. I had the honor of presenting her the Coastal Museum Association's Scott W. Smith Award for Excellence in Leadership for her support, leadership, and collaborative spirit with our own local museum community. Prior to her arrival in Savannah in 2002, she has worked at a number of important historic sites, just a few of which are the Jekyll Island Museum, the Virginia Museum of Transportation, Shadows on the Teche, a National Trust property in Louisiana, the Stan Hyatt Hall and Gardens in Akron, Ohio, and many others. She graduated from Salem College with a bachelor's degree in history and English, and from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, with a master's degree in American history and public history. She's participated in 2 Addingham study programs, including one that focused on English country houses and one on historic houses of Ireland. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to talk about one of our most historic houses here.
Well, thank you, and a happy Juneteenth early. I hope you'll recognize the day, and city employees, thank you for what you do in making the city function. And I'm just so delighted that we have a municipal archive that's accessible to the public. I grew up in a perfectly nice little town that I know nothing about, but we know a lot about Savannah because of research being accessible. So thank y'all. Thank you, and thank you to China for asking me to be your lunchtime speaker. So this is the front of the Green-Meldrim House. A lot of people can't find the front of the house because it's facing a mall, which used to be Macon Street, but the grand entrance to this 1853 house. So I'm going to take you on everything in the world that I know about Green-Meldrim House in hopefully 45 minutes, 85 slides, so just hold on. And so this is our introductory slide. So just know that last October, the keepers of the historic Green-Meldrim House received its nonprofit designation. The building is owned by St. John's Church, but this new entity, this new nonprofit, cares for the house now, and its job is to maintain, preserve, and support exhibits and tours to the public. So just know that this house has 2 functions: a parish house for St. John's Church. Do you know what a parish house is? If you grew up Baptist, we call that the fellowship hall. But it's the social hall for the church, as well as a historic house museum. So parish house and historic house museum. People are looking questioning, but that's what it does today. So just know that today these 2 buildings are linked by ownership and by fellowship, but historically they were not linked. There was a street in between that is now what we call the mall, 2 separate entities. The man who built the house was a Presbyterian, and Episcopal Church across the street, good friends, but not owned all in one until 1943. And both of these buildings are Gothic Revival, but just know that St. John's Church welcomes anyone to come and attend a service. And if you come every other Sunday, you'll get to see the Green-Meldrim House at coffee hour. So if you don't want to pay admission, you can come and partake of fellowship, eat a tomato sandwich, and see the house. We'd rather you do a tour, though. And just know the function of the parish house, again, social functions. You may have heard of Holidays, which is the Women of St. John's bazaar, which happens in November. And this year the dates are November the 14th and 15th, when the house is transformed into a restaurant and place to sell nice things and have an auction to support all the good work that the women of St. John's do. And of course, if you go to St. John's Church, you could use the church for wedding photography and for the brides to get dressed. This is the kind of thing that greets me periodically, quite often, the beautiful flowers at the church. But you just know that you can rent some of the house for a special event. Talk to me later. But we came up with a mission statement. Of course, this is everybody's going to fall asleep with that. But what my job is at the Green-Meldrim House and everybody who works there is to preserve and maintain to the highest standards the Green-Meldrim House, its garden and collections, and to share with Savannah, that's what I'm doing now, and the world, the stories of those who designed, built, lived, worked, visited, and changed history in it. And a lot of people did change history in the house. So that's what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of my career at Green-Meldrim House. And of course, Green-Meldrim House has proven its mettle. It is indeed historic. It is a National Historic Landmark, which is the cream of the crop of National Register properties. I think there are 2,500 in the nation. Now, there are about 1 million properties on the National Register, but National Historic Landmarks are rather rare. And so we had to fill out a form in a great way to be accepted as a National Historic Landmark. And we were in a pretty Tony class when we received our designation in 1976, along with the Fox Theater, Owens Thomas House, the Telfair Academy, the Tom Watson House, and the Henry Grady House. I think that's a pretty cool class to be in. So just know we're on the National Register for Historic Places. We're a National Historic Landmark, and we're part of the Savannah's National Historic Landmark District. So we're kind of important. Now, for me, trying to understand the story that we tell, this is how I conceptualize it in my personal little brain. There's a big story, and that's the American Civil War. There's a backstory, all the people that lived there, and there's the building. And we're going to start backwards and talk about the building first. Quite recently, Mark McDonald, the just retired CEO of the Georgia Trust, named the Green-Meldrim House one of his 5 favorite houses in Georgia, and said one of the finest examples of Gothic Revival architecture in the South. Well, why don't we say in the nation? I think so. And so we picked up on that pretty quickly, and we were featured in their magazine as a very important house architecturally speaking. So we're Gothic Revival. Let's just review. The Houses of Parliament are not ancient. They're 170 years old, and the Gothic Revival architecture says a lot about the 19th century and what was going on historically. Again, they look like they're ancient, but again, 170 years is not that old. And of course, the most famous residence that's Gothic Revival in America is Lyndhurst. Some of us remember Barnabas Collins. Does anybody remember Barnabas? Dark Shadows. So I've used that as the setting. And then lots of normal people lived in Gothic Revival houses. That Gothic arch, very familiar to people who study architecture. And of course, the St. John's Church is Gothic Revival. And a lot of houses of worship are Gothic Revival. We have an awful lot of Gothic Revival churches. The Cathedral of St. John the Baptist, our Jingle Bell Church, our Unitarian Church, the Lutheran Church of the Ascension. And of course, I believe that we have the only Gothic Revival temple in the world, in America maybe, Temple Mikveh Israel. And we, though, are quite unusual in that we're a Gothic Revival residence in Savannah. So Gothic Revival, so crenellation, if it was Gothic, we'd be hiding behind that while somebody was shooting bows and arrows at us in some place in England. But here it's just kind of pretty. A bay window and all of this ironwork is sort of a hallmark of the Gothic Revival style. And we've got these oriel windows floating above the architecture, which was sort of telling about the architectural style. And I dare you to tell me any other place in America or in the world that has an entrance like this. This pendant is pretty remarkable, kind of crazy, kind of great. And now we have just come to the realization, I'm going to step over here away from the mic. We think this portion was painted sandstone color, not black. We're just coming to the realization of that. Postcard from the late 19th or early 20th century of this house. The old yellow house is what the Meldrims referred to it as. And of course, the interior dome is our most spectacular feature, which we are hoping to raise money to conserve. If you have any to spare, you can talk to me later. And of course, I got to go into the attic, which was kind of scary. And this is the superstructure around the dome and the fluorescent lights that light it today because our skylight is no longer there. And in order to get up there, you got to shimmy up that ladder. I'm not going to do that again. And for a number of people, I have a friend that works at SCAD, Christian Carr, whose students did a whole class on the Green-Meldrim House because it was originally intended to showcase the Greens' art collection that they acquired on their grand tours to Europe. So the class researched all the sculptures underneath those domes that were, again, purchased in Milan or other places, again, on trips that the family took. And of course, the Pietà that's at the cathedral originally came to Savannah to be featured in that bay window in the greenhouse. Have you seen that, the Pietà in the cathedral? And the reason we know a lot about this stuff, because we're geeky people, and that's how you document a house, is using wills and that kind of thing. So we have Charles Green's will, which lists all of his artwork and all the stuff to distribute amongst his various and sundry children, including this a bust that's in one of our niches. Having dissolved my mother's household, I don't know if any of you have done that, it's quite traumatic, and we just kind of let stuff go and gave it to people we hardly knew. Well, Charles Green made a list of everything. Do you see napkins on there? Everything that he owed and which child should receive that. I mean, pretty remarkable document and the dissolution of his estate, kind of crazy. Again, see napkins, doilies with fringe. I wish I understood what that all meant. And of course, we have some artifacts that belong to the Green family, which are on exhibit in the second floor of the Green-Meldrim House. Again, the first floor, primarily parish house function. Upstairs, more important artifacts that are behind do not touch signs and things like that. But the story that we have to tell is a very important history lesson of the city at a boom time just before the American Civil War. And this map is just remarkable of the city. And things that stand out on that is the Central of Georgia Railroad on one part of the town and the Albany Gulf and Railroad on the other part. We were bookended by two railroad establishments, and if you look at the Central of Georgia, she told me I have a pointer. Oops, is that one it? Right there? That says cotton yard. And all of this up here are cotton presses, important to our story. Boomtown. The population of Savannah, this is the era when Charles Green came to America. He was from England and worked as a cotton factor. And during that time, 1840 to 1860, the population of Savannah doubled. And of course, all that new population put a stress on the city infrastructure, and we got things like the gas works, the water works, better street lighting, a larger scavenger force, and a professional police organization, all during that time period. And of course, with that boom, wealth was concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer Savannahans, and hundreds of poor whites and blacks, both free and slave, poured into the eastern and western edges of the city. Why? And you know why. Cotton. Cotton made Savannah. It built the Green-Meldrim House, and it was extremely important to the economy of Savannah. And Charles Green was at the right place at the right time to amass fabulous wealth as a cotton factor. And this is Charles Green later in his life. And of course, he is the Mr. Green of the Green-Meldrim House. Now, I assumed that I knew what a cotton factor was, but I really didn't. And so if you're like me, you look to pictures. And so this is Edward Degas' picture. He had family, the great French artist, had family in New Orleans. And so he painted several pictures of cotton factor houses in New Orleans, which I assume the ones in Savannah were much like those as well. So we got a guy just kind of hanging out, and then we got some people judging the cotton and then doing paperwork. So the job of the factor was as a middleman. Savannah was all about middlemen. It's still about middlemen, getting the raw material from the plantation to the factory. That's what a factor did, often in agricultural endeavors. So this is what one resource said that a factor did. Services in the United States included baggage, mending, wharfage, cartage, storage, fire insurance, and maritime insurance. In Europe, the planter was charged with the dock dues, cartage, portage, weighage, mending, warehouse rent, freight, and duties. So from the plantation to the textile mill in Manchester, all that stuff going on, all those connections were the purview of the cotton factor. And of course, we have an extraordinary Civil War story to tell. I don't know, do you know the story? Well, Charles Green was never an American citizen. His son was a veteran of the Confederacy, and his sympathies lied with the Confederacy, I'm sure. And he got a letter on July the 1st, 1861, from the Secretary of War of the Confederacy to sort of, putting it sort of quickly, to be a gun runner for the Confederacy, go to England, get some muskets, bring them back, 100,000 of those. And he said yes. So, so the problem was that the Pinkertons followed him around England, and he was arrested for that work, and was thrown in jail at Fort Warren in Boston Harbor. And so interrogated, stayed there 3 months, took a modified oath of allegiance, modified because he was not an American citizen, and went back to his wife, who was staying in Virginia at the time. So again, he was a gun runner for the Confederacy. I don't know how long he stayed in Virginia during the American Civil War, but he was back in Savannah in 1864 during the Sherman's March to the Sea. I love this graphic. It tells everything about that. Now, it's a very long story about 62,000 teenage boys tearing up the state of Georgia, because in two armies led by William Tecumseh Sherman. It was total war, and the outcome was not to have taken place in Savannah, but the sea. But when Savannah was vacated by the Confederate Army, Sherman made Savannah its headquarters, and Charles Green's house was his personal headquarters. And the house became a celebrity because of that. This is a Harper's Weekly magazine from January 1865, getting the news out across the United States that the war was nearing an end because of the completion of the March to the Sea and breaking the will of the South to break away again. So you see Mr. Green's house in the center of this two-page spread. Fortifications around Savannah were also featured, and also the hall of the Green-Meldrim House is right there. Now, the story is that Charles Green and the mayor and dignitaries went out to meet Sherman, who was encamped outside the city, and they said, "We surrender." And then Mr. Green said, this is sort of simplified, Mr. Green says, "Why don't you stay at my house?" Why would he do that? And so this is what Sherman said. At first, I felt strongly disinclined to make use of any private dwelling, Sherman recalled, lest complaints should arise of damage and loss of furniture. Yeah, but anyway, he sent a lieutenant around to look at the place. It was spacious and convenient yarding for horses, and so he made it his headquarters between December 22nd, 1864, and February the 1st, 1865, and history was made there. And of course, this is the pictures that were in Harper's Weekly a little bit closer up. And so a lot was written about the house as a headquarters for the military establishment. The mansion on Madison Square, Major Hitchcock wrote it to his wife, was very handsomely furnished before the war. Looks a little bit worn now. In the White Hall are pieces of statuary, banana trees growing in tubs, several fine pictures in various rooms. And Sherman said that the elegant bath and dressing room bedroom look out of proportion to my poor baggage. Sherman wrote the famous telegram, the text for the famous telegram, giving Savannah, Georgia, to President Lincoln for Christmas. I'm sure you are familiar with that. It says, "Merry Christmas, Mr. President. I'm giving you Savannah, along with 150 heavy guns and 25,000 bales of cotton." And who did the cotton belong to? Some of it to Mr. Green. Another important event that happened in the house during the time of Sherman's occupation was the invitation to 20 black ministers to the house. This all has to do with the tragedy at Ebenezer Creek and all of the newly freed people attaching themselves to the United States Army. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton came down from Washington, D.C. to meet with Sherman about the 4 million new Americans that would be welcomed into the United States and how that should be dealt with. And so what they did was they said, well, we might as well ask some African Americans what they think. And so 20 black preachers, and of course, I don't know if, I'm sure you know a lot of preachers and a very diverse lot of people representing all different types of ideologies, but they elected one person to speak for them, Garrison Frazier, a 67-year-old pastor, to speak for the 20 preachers, and these are the preachers, their names. And so some of these newly freed came through the front door of the Green-Meldrim House, up the stairs, seeing that beautiful dome, and into the private headquarters of General Sherman, which was a bedroom, previously a bedroom on the second floor. And I photographed an illustration of what that could have looked like. And the result of that, well, it was the first time, as far as I'm aware, in American history that black folk were asked, what do you want for your people? And what they said was, land. And so the consequence was what we call Special Field Order 15, or 40 acres and a mule. And what that did was reserved about 30 miles of land between Charleston and Jacksonville to be divided up into family plots administered through the Freedmen's Bureau. And of course, the 20 preachers were asked, would you rather live apart from white folk or live with them? And of course, they said live apart. And they wanted, land was divided up, and And that project began, but we know what happened. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and those promises did not come to fruition. But they still have resonance in the American lexicon. And about the people that lived into the house. So we've talked about the house, we've talked about the big story, but a lot of people lived and worked in the house. Charles Green and his second wife, Lucy, and he was this was his second wife, and he was 20 years her senior, and a successful guy. So when you got married to a successful older gentleman and money was no object, what would you do on your honeymoon? Go to Europe and buy stuff for the house. And so that's what they did. And we continue to research their lives. And a lot of this research is geeky. Thank you, Luciana. Geeks are nice. But this is a census from 1860. And we need to talk about all the people that live in the house. So recently, we're trying to find out about the 8 enslaved people who lived in the house, and their names are not listed in the 1860 census, just their ages, their gender, and their race. So a friend of ours, Kelly Westfield, did some research, and she came up with some ships manifests traveling up and down the eastern seaboard. And so we got some names of people: Philip, Molly, Ida, Rebecca, George, Parker, and John. So along with the whites who lived in a house on one side, with the African Americans on the other. We're continuing to research the African Americans who lived in the household, if anybody wants a project. And so after the American Civil War, Charles Green lost Lucy at the age of 39, and he married her cousin, Minnie. And I'm sure you know who this is, Susie King Taylor. She lost her job as a teacher after the American Civil War, my understanding, through her very important memoir that she was a teacher. And there are a lot of people that need to be taught to become literate after the Civil War. And she opened a school in Savannah, but the Freedmen's Bureau school was free, so she couldn't make a living as a teacher. And so when you lose your job, what do? You go knocking on doors. And so she went knocking on the Green's door, and she worked for Mrs. Green in 1871-72. And she went with the Greens up to Massachusetts and saw it was more hospitable for African Americans up there. And that's where she ended up settling. And she wrote her very famous memoir up in Massachusetts. So she was one of the people that lived in the Green-Meldrim House, or lived or worked in the Green-Meldrim House. And of course, there's so many stories to tell. There's just not enough time to tell all these stories, but the second family was quite interesting too. Judge Peter Meldrum was a president of the American Bar Association. I believe he was the mayor of Savannah. He was instrumental in getting Savannah State located in Savannah. And now we tell this story and people enjoy it. He had 4 high-spirited daughters. Were you a high-spirited daughter? I see a few of you in here who were. One of those high-spirited daughters was named Sophie Shonard, Sophie Meldrum Shonard, and she opened a high-end boutique in New York City, became pretty famous, catered to socialites and politicians' wives. If you saw the TV show about Truman Capote's swans, they all bought their clothes from Chez Nignon, and a young politician's wife, a young senator's wife, loved the clothes and the cut of the clothes at Chez Nignon, and when she became First Lady, bought a lot of clothes. And of course, I'm talking about Jackie Kennedy, and she bought the pink suit that she wore to Dallas at Sophie Shonard's shop. So a little interesting connection there with the most important and sad outfit in American history. And then we have another family member. If you were French, you would know about Julian Green, a grandson of Charles Green, who became a very important French man of letters. even though he had American parents, and wrote in an unreconstructed way about the American South from the stories that he heard from his parents. And it was from Julian Green's protege that we got a lot of objects back in the house that are being interpreted there. So an important man of letters. So a lot of stories to tell, and how we tell those in a way that is interesting for people is something that I wouldn't say struggling with. It's a nice problem to have, and very important Savannah stories and national stories. So I appreciate your time. We're doing docent training now. And so if you want to be involved, we'd love to have you, and I'm happy to answer questions about the Green-Meldrim House. Yes, sir.
What is a scavenger force?
That's a garbage collector.
Okay.
That they call them scavengers.
Okay.
Yes.
One of the things you talked about related to the special order was like the conversation that happened with the ministers. And I was just curious, other than the primary source document that is the field order itself, is there anything else that documents that conversation?
There is the most fascinating article in the journal. It was called the Journal of Negro History in 1954. Can't believe it's that long ago. That details an article that appeared in a New York magazine. But I'm thinking, because this was, and I'm just saying it because we haven't done deep research on this, is that there must have been a military stenographer that took every single detail of the conversation. So there were 12 questions that they were asked that Garrison Frazier answered in detail. So yes, it's documented. I'll send you it's fascinating, multi-page description of that meeting. It lists all the names and the ages of the gentlemen that were there, and gives a little bit of biographical sketch about what churches they were ministers of. So there's a lot of information there that needs to be talked about. Yes, sir.
Can you say something about the architect of the house, and also, do you know where the ironwork was cast at? Was it cast locally or way off yonder somewhere?
The house was designed by the very prolific John Norris. It seems like almost every house of significance from 1846 to 1861 was designed by John Norris. So we got the Andrew Lowe House, the Mercer Williams House, Massey School, Abrams Hall, the Jingle Bell Church. What are you pointing at? What?
Right across the street, the Customs House.
The Customs House was the first one he did that cemented his reputation. So what was the second question?
Do you know where the ironwork was cast?
Okay, so this goes into like a historical research. You got to have a resource, you got to transcribe a resource, and then you've got to interpret a resource. So we have had a resource for a long time. This was the account book of John Norris. So that last slide one of the last slides you saw was Julian Green. In France, he had this account book of every detail of the construction of the house, the names of all the workers, the vendors for everything, how much people were paid, when this happened from July the 24th, 1850 until 1861. And so because we had not had time or the inclination to actually interpret this resource, we said, well, certainly he would have gotten the ironwork done here. But since we've read the resource, we know that everything except the bricks, which were made here, and some of the woodwork was brought down from New York City. And so I think the ironworker's name was an establishment called Sinclair. In New York City. We have a person on the keepers who's doing a lot of research on the account book. And so a firm named Sinclair from New York City. It's like he brought all of that stuff, the glass, the plaster, and that kind of stuff down from New York City. So you got to interpret your resource and not just have one. Questions? How many of you have been to the Green? Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna make a comment about, yesterday at 6 PM on NPR radio, they started a series called 40 Acres and a Lie. And, there are gonna be 2 more segments, next 2 Sundays, and it's all about the, 40 acres and a mule situation in, number 15. Next week, at 6 PM on Sunday, it will be covering the Skidaway Island situation and the landings and how all that played together. So it'll be very interesting. Just FYI.
Thanks.
Yes, I think I just read a portion of that, and it's Skidaway Island was divided up into those 40-acre plots. Well, I hope you'll come and visit us and see the house as it evolves. Just know that before the nonprofit was formed, the house was run by the women of St. John's in a very able way, but they wanted it to be open more, and so our goal is to be open, because right now we're open 4 days a week. We hope to be open 5 days a week with programming and all the kinds of things that make a museum fun to be a part of. So we're going to have, we've had a Christmas program about Christmas during wartime last year. Yes, sir.
Well, what's the cost for maintaining a building like that over time?
Oh, I don't know. We don't have that document a lot. You're asking about how much does it cost today, or how much
Yes, how much, what's the,
our annual budget?
yeah, the nut?
I'm not going to share that.
Okay.
About that, see, the house belongs to St. John's, and all of those things are handled by the vestry of St. John's.
Okay.
But it's not it's like a yacht. You know what they say about a yacht is the hole that you throw money. But we do good things.
Well, I want to thank Jamie for coming to talk with us today and share all the stories, and we look forward to the great things you guys are going to do with Green-Meldrim House. So, thank you. Thank you all for coming. If you wanted to be added to the email listserv, just add your name and email to that pad on the table. If you didn't get a chance to look at the exhibit as you came in the building, please stop and look. That's Paige Byrne. That's local painter, and it's part of her series that she did a painting for every square. We picked out a few that we really liked. So take a look at that if you haven't seen it yet. And we hopefully will see you next month. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.